For 20 years, I kept a secret that could shake the art world to its core. I was the invisible compass behind some of the most powerful street art ever created, the woman who guided Banksy's hand toward forgotten stories that needed telling. No one knew. Not the critics, not the collectors who paid millions, not even my own daughter. Then came the devastating words that broke my heart. "You're not cultured enough for my art gallery opening." My own child, Lena, didn't just reject me. She stole my private letters and twisted my life's most meaningful connection into a public exhibition, mocking me as delusional. What she never imagined was that her urban legend was real, and that on opening night, as Providence's elite gathered to witness her triumph, the shadows I'd lived in for decades would finally speak with a voice that could no longer be silenced. Follow this channel for more heart-wrenching true stories that will leave you breathless. Like and comment where you're watching from, and let me know if you've ever had a moment when someone underestimated you, only to deeply regret it later. That morning in Providence, the wind howled through the cracks of my front door like it wanted to remind me of my loneliness. At 67, I'd grown accustomed to being overlooked, but I never imagined I'd hear those words from my own daughter. "You're not cultured enough to be at my gallery opening." I still remember how my hands trembled when Lena said it. We were sitting in that fancy coffee shop downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and $7 lattes that taste like burnt cardboard. I'd worn my good blue cardigan, the one without any pulls in the fabric, and even put on lipstick. Foolishly, I thought we were meeting so she could personally invite me to her big night. "Mom, you wouldn't understand the artistic significance." Her voice was different these days, cultivated, like she was always auditioning for someone important. "The curator from the Whitney Museum is coming, and several prominent collectors. It would be uncomfortable for everyone." Uncomfortable. That's the word that broke my heart. As if the woman who had cleaned houses for 20 years to put her through art school, who had stood for hours in cramped museum hallways just so Lena could see every exhibition that came through town, was now an embarrassment. I didn't cry there in the coffee shop. I sat with my back straight, nodding as if I understood perfectly, while something inside me withered. The drive home was a blur. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, feeling like I might shatter into 1,000 pieces. That evening, I was sitting in my small living room, holding an old photo album, when I heard a soft thud against my front door. It wasn't the newspaper, too late for that, and not the usual junk mail. Something in me knew this sound would change everything. I opened the door slowly, and there it was. A worn brown paper envelope on my welcome mat. No postmark, no return address. Just my name, Margaret, written in a hasty, distinctive scrawl I hadn't seen in over 20 years but would recognize anywhere. My heart stuttered in my chest. I glanced up and down the empty street, but whoever had delivered it was long gone. With trembling fingers, I picked it up, feeling its weight. Heavier than just paper, something solid inside. Back in my armchair, I carefully broke the seal. Inside was an old photograph of a hidden mural in Detroit. Weathered brick walls bearing the image of a young girl releasing a red balloon. And beneath it, a handwritten note. "You were my compass. B." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. I knew exactly who B was. And I knew that if this secret ever came to light, not just my daughter, but the entire world would discover that the simple woman they all treated as invisible had been the personal advisor to none other than Banksy, perhaps the most mysterious and celebrated street artist in modern history. My mind raced back to those early days before fame found him, when he was just a young artist with fierce convictions, and I was a middle-aged woman with stories to tell. How we'd exchange letters about forgotten neighborhoods and overlooked injustices, how he'd ask where truth needed to be spoken, and I'd point him toward the shadows where people suffered in silence. Now here I was, holding physical proof of a connection that art collectors would kill to verify, a revelation that would force my daughter to see me, truly see me, for perhaps the first time in decades. But revealing this would mean betraying a sacred promise, breaking a confidence that had been kept for decades through hundreds of museum exhibitions, millions in art sales, and endless speculation about his identity. He had trusted me with something precious. Could I betray that trust, even to heal my own wounded heart? I sat in my quiet living room, the envelope heavy in my lap, caught between the pain of a daughter's rejection and the weight of a promise made long ago. Outside, the October wind rattled my windows like it was demanding an answer. Tomorrow would be the opening of Lena's gallery, her crowning achievement, and I held in my hands the power to transform that night into something neither of us could imagine. The question was, did I have the courage to use it? I barely slept that night. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb, and every time I closed my eyes I saw Lena's face, not as the sophisticated gallery owner she'd become, but as the little girl who once pressed paint-stained hands to my cheeks and said, "Look, Mommy, I made you pretty colors." Morning came with no answers. I made my coffee too strong and burned my toast, distracted by the weight of my decision. The phone rang just after 9. My heart leapt. Maybe Lena had reconsidered. But the caller ID showed my sister-in-law, Patricia. "Margaret, I was just calling to check on you," she said, her voice dripping with that sugary concern that always masked something more bitter. "I heard about Lena's gallery opening tonight. Such a shame you won't be there." My grip tightened on the receiver. So Lena had told the whole family I wasn't invited. Who said I wasn't going? The words slipped out before I could stop them. A pause. "Oh, well, Lena mentioned you weren't comfortable with that sort of thing. You know, all those art people talking about conceptual whatnots and modern expressions." She laughed lightly. "Don't feel bad, Margaret. Most of us wouldn't understand it either. Most of us. As if we were the simple folk. And Lena had somehow transcended to a higher plane of existence." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. "Actually, Patricia, I understand more than you might think." "Of course you do, dear." Her tone was placating, the way you'd speak to a child. "Oh, by the way, I mentioned to Pastor Williams at church that you've been a little off lately. Making up stories, you know. He said the senior ministry would be happy to check in on you more often." My cheeks burned. So Patricia had been telling people I was losing my mind. I'd never made up stories in my life. I'd just occasionally mentioned knowing someone in the art world from my museum cleaning days. Not once had I said who. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I need to go now." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with rage and humiliation. For 20 years, I'd kept Banksy's confidence out of respect and integrity. Now my own family thought I was becoming senile, inventing connections to make my life seem less ordinary. The irony was almost too much to bear. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Roger, Lena's husband, standing on my porch in his tailored charcoal suit, looking as out of place in my working-class neighborhood as a peacock in a chicken coop. "Margaret," he nodded stiffly. "May I come in? I'd like to talk." I let him in, though every instinct told me not to. Roger had always looked at me like I was a problem to be managed. He made straight for my kitchen, then stopped short when he saw the brown envelope on the table. "What's that?" he asked too casually. I moved past him and slipped the envelope into a drawer. "Just some old papers." "What brings you here, Roger? Lena busy with final preparations?" His eyes lingered on the drawer before he turned to me with that practiced smile, the one that never reached his eyes. "Actually, that's why I'm here, about tonight's opening." He sat without being invited, crossed his legs, and straightened his Italian silk tie. "Look, Margaret, I know you're hurt about not being included, but you have to understand Lena's worked years for this moment. The critics, the collectors, they're looking for something specific, a narrative, if you will. And I don't fit that narrative," I finished for him. "Precisely." He seemed relieved I understood. "Her origin story needs to be aspirational, self-made. You understand?" What I understood was that my daughter was ashamed of her roots, of me, the cleaning woman who'd raised her alone after her father died. I was the chapter she wanted to edit out of her biography. "What if I just stayed in the background?" I asked, hating the pleading in my voice. Roger shook his head. "It's best if you maintain distance." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. I thought this might help. He slid it across the table. I didn't touch it, but I could see the edge of a check inside. "What's this for?" My voice had gone very quiet. "Consider it compensation for your discretion." His eyes flicked to the drawer where I'd put Banksy's envelope. "And for anything else you might be keeping to yourself." Ice spread through my veins. What did he know? What did he suspect? "I don't want your money, Roger." He stood, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "Think about it, Margaret. Lena's on the verge of something big. Wouldn't want anything to distract from that, would we? Especially not stories that people might find hard to believe." The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. If I spoke up about the invitation or about anything else, I'd be dismissed as a bitter, delusional old woman. After he left, I sat frozen at my kitchen table. Outside, dark clouds gathered, matching my mood. My eyes kept drifting to the drawer with Banksy's envelope, then to the check Roger had left behind. I had two impossible choices: reveal my connection to one of the most famous anonymous artists in the world and break a 20-year promise, or swallow this new humiliation along with all the others. Either way, I was about to lose something precious. As rain began to spatter against my windows, I wondered what Banksy would do. The man who'd built a career on speaking truth to power through art that appeared when least expected. And I wondered if, after all these years of helping him find his voice, it was finally time to find my own. After Roger left, the rain turned from gentle tapping to an angry drumming against my windows. I sat paralyzed, staring at the drawer where I'd hidden the envelope. Something was shifting in the air around me, a lifetime of careful silence suddenly threatening to crack open. I'd spent decades being the invisible woman, the one who mopped floors at the Providence Museum of Contemporary Art, while wealthy patrons walked past without a glance. The mother who sat alone at school functions because I couldn't afford the right clothes or the right words to fit in with the other parents. The widow who raised a daughter to soar while I remained earthbound. With trembling hands, I pulled the rusty step stool from beside my refrigerator and carried it to my bedroom. My knees protested as I climbed up and reached toward the highest shelf of my closet, where a plain cardboard box had sat untouched for years. Inside it was a battered tin box, once a Christmas cookie container, now the keeper of my most guarded secret. I sat on the edge of my bed, the tin cold against my palms, and took a deep breath before opening it. The smell hit me first: paper aged by time, graphite, and the faint scent of spray paint that had never quite faded. Inside were letters, sketches on napkins, hasty notes, and small drawings, all bearing the same distinctive handwriting as the envelope that had arrived yesterday. My fingers skimmed over a cocktail napkin with a rough sketch of a girl holding a balloon. "Is this too obvious?" he'd scrawled beneath it. My reply was written in blue ink underneath. "Truth doesn't need to shout to be heard." I picked up another paper, a detailed map of Providence with certain locations circled in red: the homeless shelter on Mathewson Street, the closed textile factory where immigrant families once worked 16-hour days, the wall of the bank that had foreclosed on half my neighborhood during the recession. These were all places I'd pointed out during our strange correspondence, places where people struggled, where stories needed telling. Within months, each location had mysteriously featured a new Banksy original, each artwork speaking to the specific injustice happening there. What had started as an accidental meeting, me catching a young artist sketching on a wall behind the museum during my night shift, had evolved into something I never could have imagined. I didn't know his real name. I didn't need to. I only knew he listened when I spoke about the invisible people of Providence, the ones who, like me, lived in the margins of a city more concerned with Ivy League prestige than working-class dignity. A tear splashed onto one of the letters, and I quickly wiped it away. I couldn't afford to damage these fragile pieces of paper. They were proof of something extraordinary, that a woman who'd been silenced her whole life had somehow found a voice that echoed around the world, even if no one knew it was mine. At the bottom of the tin was the most dangerous item, a small charcoal sketch signed with the familiar B, but inscribed for my compass at the bottom. It was the only piece he'd ever created specifically for me. I stared at it, remembering the day I'd found it tucked under the windshield wiper of my old Buick. That was right after his work had started appearing in major cities, when the art world had begun its obsessive hunt for his identity. I'd understood the message immediately. Our connection had to go dormant. It was too dangerous now that the spotlight had found him. And for 20 years I'd honored that necessity. I'd watched from afar as his fame grew, as his art sold for millions, as he became a household name while still remaining a ghost. I never told a soul, not even Lena, that the most sought-after artist in the world had once considered a cleaning woman from Providence his moral compass. I made the first truly momentous decision of my life that rainy afternoon. Instead of returning the tin to its hiding place, I set it on my kitchen table beside the brown envelope that had arrived yesterday, the physical evidence of my secret life, now in plain view. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like opening a window in a sealed room. As I arranged the contents carefully, one phrase from his letters caught my eye. It was from years ago, written on the back of a museum program. "The world will only hear you when silence is no longer possible." I'd never fully understood what he meant. Why would the world ever need to hear from me? I was nobody, just the woman who guided his artistic conscience from the shadows. But now, faced with my daughter's rejection and the mysterious reappearance of our connection, those words seemed to shimmer with new meaning. Maybe there comes a point when staying silent becomes a kind of betrayal, not just of yourself, but of the truth. Outside, the storm was intensifying. Tree branches scratched against my windows like fingers trying to get in. I made myself a cup of tea and sat beside my exposed secrets, wondering who I might become if I finally let myself be seen. The gallery opening was tomorrow night. Whatever I decided to do, I didn't have much time. And I had a feeling that more than just my relationship with Lena hung in the balance. As darkness fell, I caught myself repeatedly glancing at the phone, half expecting it to ring with another call. From Lena, from Roger, maybe even from B himself. But the only sound was the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder, like the sky itself was deliberating along with me. I finally went to bed with no clear answer, but with the certainty that by bringing that tin box down from its hiding place, I'd already set something in motion that couldn't easily be stopped. Morning arrived with that particular stillness that follows a storm. Puddles on my walkway reflected a sky washed clean, but my mind remained clouded with indecision. I'd made coffee and was absently stirring it when my doorbell rang, an unexpected sound at 7:30 a.m. I opened the door to find my niece Amber, Lena's cousin and Patricia's youngest daughter. At 25, she looked startlingly like Lena at that age. Same sharp cheekbones, same intelligent eyes. Unlike Lena, however, Amber had always been kind to me. She visited on holidays when others made excuses and sometimes just stopped by with coffee and muffins because, "Aunt Margaret," she said, slightly breathless, "I'm sorry to come so early. Can I talk to you?" I ushered her in, noticing her outfit, black slacks and a crisp white blouse with a gallery logo on the breast pocket. "You're working at Lena's gallery?" I asked, surprised. She nodded, fingers fidgeting with her car keys. "Just an internship for my arts management degree. That's actually why I'm here." I gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table, quickly shifting the tin box out of sight. Something in her expression made me wary. "Aunt Margaret, there's a piece in the gallery that's going to be unveiled tonight. It's the centerpiece of Lena's exhibition." She paused, her eyes meeting mine with unusual intensity. "I think you're going to feel exposed when you see it." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, exposed?" Amber bit her lip. "I shouldn't even be telling you this. I signed an NDA and everything." She leaned forward, lowering her voice though we were alone. "The piece is called Providence Whispers. It's about, according to Lena, a cleaning woman who secretly influenced street art in the city by telling stories to local artists." The mug nearly slipped from my hand. "What?" "It includes photographs of the museum where you worked, reconstructed conversations, even some of the locations where famous pieces appeared. Lena claims it's all based on urban legends she researched, but..." Amber's eyes darted to where I'd moved the tin box. "The way she describes the woman, her background, her history, it's you, Aunt Margaret, it's unmistakably you." My mind raced. How could Lena know? I'd never told her anything. Unless, did Lena go through my things? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Amber looked uncomfortable. "I don't know for sure, but a few weeks ago she asked me to help her pick up some of your old photo albums, said you wanted them digitized as a surprise. I dropped them off at her studio, and when I came back later," she hesitated. "She had paper spread out that didn't look like photos. When she saw me, she swept them into a drawer really fast. A sick feeling spread through my stomach. My own daughter had stolen my secrets, not out of love or even curiosity, but to exploit them for her art career. The worst part," Amber continued, "is how she's framing it. The cleaning woman in her installation is portrayed as delusional, someone who invented connections to famous artists to escape her mundane life. There are audio recordings where actors read made-up diary entries that make this woman sound unhinged." My hands began to shake. Not only had Lena discovered my secret, she'd twisted it into something pathetic and false. In her version, I wasn't Banksy's trusted confidant. I was a sad, lonely woman spinning fantasies. "Why would she do this?" I whispered, more to myself than to Amber. Amber's expression softened with pity. "The exhibition is called Invented Histories. It's about how people create false narratives to cope with disappointment." She reached across the table to touch my hand. "Aunt Margaret, I'm so sorry. I don't think she realizes what she's doing to you. But I knew better. Lena understood exactly what she was doing. As Amber left for her shift at the gallery, promising to call later, I sat motionless at my kitchen table. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. My own child had not only rejected me, she'd stolen my most precious secret and distorted it into something shameful for public consumption. I was still sitting there an hour later when I noticed movement outside my window. A familiar figure was walking slowly past my house, his army surplus jacket hanging loosely on his thin frame. Jack Howard, a Vietnam veteran who'd lived on the streets until a housing program finally found him an apartment 3 years ago. I'd met Jack during my museum days. He used to shelter in the alley behind the building during bad weather, and I'd bring him coffee during my breaks. Later, he became one of the stories I told in my letters. The decorated soldier forgotten by the country he'd served, fighting demons no one could see. Within a week of sharing his story, a mural appeared on the VA hospital wall. A soldier whose shadow formed the shape of a homeless man, with the words, "Still fighting," stenciled beneath. Now Jack was outside my house, which was unusual. He rarely left his neighborhood these days. When he saw me at the window, he raised his hand in greeting, then beckoned me outside. "Morning, Compass," he said quietly when I stepped onto my porch. I froze. Only one person had ever called me that. Jack's weathered face crinkled into a knowing smile. "Yeah, I know some things, Margaret. More than most. Got a message for you about tonight's big show at that fancy gallery downtown." "How do you know about that?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "Got connections you wouldn't believe," he replied, tapping the side of his nose. "Listen, there's something shady about that exhibition. People saying it's going to expose some big secret about Providence street art. Thought you should know, considering your special knowledge." The way he emphasized those last words made it clear. Jack somehow knew about my connection to Banksy. "What else do you know?" I asked, my heart pounding. He glanced up and down the street before answering. "Not here. Meet me at Kennedy Plaza at noon, by the old fountain." Then he walked away, leaving me with yet another layer of complication. First the envelope, then Roger's thinly veiled threats, Amber's revelation, and now Jack with his cryptic warning. The consequences of my decades-long secret were multiplying by the hour, spinning beyond my control like leaves caught in a whirlwind. As I went back inside, my gaze fell on Lena's childhood drawing still stuck to my refrigerator with faded magnets. In one, she'd drawn the two of us holding hands beneath a rainbow, with the wobbly words, "Me and Mommy," underneath. When had my daughter become someone who could hurt me so deliberately? And what would she do when she discovered that her urban legend was actually true? Kennedy Plaza at noon was crowded with office workers on lunch break, college students from nearby Brown University, and tourists taking photos of the historic buildings. I stood by the fountain, my heart fluttering like a trapped bird in my chest. Every face seemed suspicious, every glance potentially hostile. Was Roger having me followed? Had Lena sent someone to make sure I stayed away from her gallery? I was about to give up when Jack appeared, materializing from the crowd with that strange stealth that homeless veterans often develop, the ability to be invisible until they choose not to be. "Let's walk," he said, not meeting my eyes. Less chance of being overheard. We strolled toward the riverside walkway, where the noise of water rushing over the small dam would muffle our conversation. Jack moved with a slight limp, an old war injury that acted up in damp weather. "How much do you know?" I asked, once we were alone. Jack gave me a sidelong glance. "I know you and the artist had a special arrangement. I know you pointed him toward stories that needed telling, including mine." I stopped walking. "How could you possibly know that?" He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Because he told me, Margaret. Not directly and not your name. But years ago, after that mural appeared at the VA, he found me. Said a woman he called his compass had told him about a forgotten soldier who deserved to be seen. My legs felt weak. I'd been so careful, so discreet, and yet here was Jack, holding a piece of my secret. "There's more," he continued, pulling something from his jacket pocket. It was a folded newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. "Found this in the library archives when I was staying there during that cold snap in '08. I unfolded it carefully. It was a small article from the Providence Journal, dated nearly 15 years ago. The headline read, "Anonymous street artist leaves mark on Providence." My eyes scanned down to find my name circled in red ink. Museum custodian Margaret Wilson declined to comment on the artwork that appeared near her workplace. The article was about one of the first murals that had appeared after my conversations with Banksy began. A piece depicting children playing in the spray of a broken fire hydrant, painted on the wall of a community center that had lost its funding. I never spoke to any reporters, I said, confused. Exactly, Jack replied. Every other staff member gave quotes. You were the only one who declined to comment. To most people, that means nothing. But to someone looking for connections, I understood immediately. My silence had become a breadcrumb in a trail I never meant to leave. Last night, I got this slipped under my apartment door, Jack continued, producing another envelope. Inside was a photocopy of the same article with my name circled again and a short note. The compass points to her. Gallery opening tomorrow night. Be ready. My hand flew to my mouth. Who sent this? Don't know for sure, Jack said. But word on the street is something big is planned for that gallery opening tonight. Something that's going to reveal truths about Providence's street art scene. I felt dizzy with implications. First the envelope at my door, then Roger's veiled threats, Amber's warning about the exhibition, and now this. The secret I'd kept for decades was unraveling from multiple directions at once. Jack, why are you telling me this? I asked. Why get involved? His weathered face softened. Because that mural changed my life, Margaret. After it appeared, people started noticing us vets again. The shelter got funding. I got help. He gestured to his clean clothes, his steady hands. 3 years sober now with a roof over my head. All because you told my story to someone who could make the world see it. Tears pricked at my eyes. I'd never known the impact of that particular mural. I'd moved to the night shift at the museum soon after and lost touch with the veterans who used to gather behind the building. There's one more thing, Jack said, his voice dropping. That installation at your daughter's gallery? It's based on stolen material. I swallowed hard. Stolen from me, you mean? My private letters. He nodded. Not just that. The centerpiece of the exhibition is a recreation of a mural that was never photographed. One that appeared in an abandoned subway station for just 2 days before the transit authority painted over it. I remembered it well. A haunting piece showing a woman with her back turned, her shadow stretching forward to embrace a child running toward her. It had been inspired by a story I'd told about a young mother battling cancer, determined to live long enough to see her daughter graduate. How could Lena know about that mural? I whispered. It was destroyed before anyone documented it. That's just it, Jack said. She couldn't know, unless she had access to very specific information, the kind only you and the artist would have. The implication hung in the air between us. Not only had Lena taken my letters, but she was using knowledge only Banksy and I shared to build her artistic reputation. What am I supposed to do with all this? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Jack checked his watch. The opening's at 7, so you've got about 7 hours to decide whether to let your daughter rewrite your story or to finally tell your own. As we parted ways, Jack pressed the newspaper clipping into my hand. For what it's worth, I think the world deserves to know the truth about the real compass behind the art that changed this city. I walked home slowly, the clipping burning a hole in my pocket. The sky had clouded over again, threatening more rain. How fitting. Another storm brewing just as my life seemed ready to burst its carefully constructed banks. When I reached my front door, I noticed something I'd missed earlier. A folded piece of paper wedged into the frame. My hands trembled as I unfolded it to reveal a simple sketch of a compass, its needle pointing firmly north with the words beneath. Truth always finds its direction. I looked up and down the street but saw no one. Yet I could feel it, the invisible presence of someone who had been watching, waiting, perhaps guiding these revelations toward an inevitable conclusion. As I stepped inside, I realized the tin box on my kitchen table had been disturbed. Panic shot through me until I noticed what was different. The contents had been arranged in a precise pattern, with one letter missing, the letter about the subway mural. The one that would prove Lena's centerpiece was based on stolen knowledge. Someone had been in my house while I was gone. Someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. The gallery opening was hours away, and I now had no doubt. I wasn't the only one planning to be there, invitation or not. I spent the afternoon in a state of nervous preparation. If I was going to attend the opening, uninvited and unwelcome, I needed to look like I belonged. I pulled out the one good dress I owned, a navy blue sheath I'd bought for a cousin's wedding 3 years ago. It was simple but elegant, with a timeless quality that might let me blend in with the art crowd. My hands shook as I applied makeup, something I rarely bothered with these days. A touch of mascara, a sweep of blush to bring color to my pale cheeks, and lipstick in a shade my mother used to call quietly defiant. I swept my silver hair into a neat chignon, secured with my grandmother's pearl-tipped pins. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Gone was the invisible cleaning woman, the forgettable mother. In her place stood someone with purpose, with secrets, with power. I tucked the newspaper clipping and one key letter from the tin box into my clutch purse. Insurance, should I need to prove my connection. The rest I hid under a loose floorboard in my bedroom closet. If someone had been bold enough to enter my house once, they might return. The gallery was in the trendy part of downtown, where old textile factories had been converted into luxury lofts and high-end retail spaces. As my taxi approached, I could see spotlights illuminating the building's facade and a red carpet leading to the entrance. People in expensive clothing clustered outside, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You sure this is the right place, ma'am?" the driver asked, clearly doubting that someone like me belonged at such an event. "Yes," I said, handing him the fare. "This is exactly where I need to be." I walked toward the entrance with measured steps, trying to project the confidence I didn't feel. A young man with a tablet stood checking names against a guest list. "Name, please?" he asked without looking up. "Margaret Wilson," I said, holding my breath. He scrolled through his tablet, frowning slightly. "I don't see." "She's with me," came a voice from behind. I turned to find Amber, looking elegant in a black cocktail dress. She smiled at the attendant. "Ms. Wilson is my guest. She should have been on the list." The young man hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, go right in." Amber squeezed my arm as we walked through the door. "Aunt Margaret, you look amazing," she whispered. "But are you sure about this? Lena's going to freak when she sees you." "I'm sure," I said, though my racing heart suggested otherwise. The gallery was a vast open space with polished concrete floors and exposed brick walls. Waiters circulated with champagne and tiny hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Spotlights illuminated various installations, photographs, sculptures, and mixed media pieces, all centered around the theme of invented histories. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, needing something to steady my nerves. The bitter effervescence felt foreign on my tongue. When had I last drunk champagne? Lena's college graduation, perhaps. "The main installation is in the back room," Amber murmured. "They're unveiling it at 8. That's the one I told you about." I nodded, still taking in the scene. The gallery was filling quickly with Providence's elite, university professors, wealthy collectors, and local celebrities. I recognized the mayor chatting with the director of the RISD Museum. In one corner, Patricia was holding court with a group of church friends, no doubt explaining how her niece had graciously included them in this exclusive event. Then I saw Roger, standing near a large photograph of the Providence waterfront. He was deep in conversation with a man I recognized from the newspaper, an influential art critic from New York. Roger's hand gestures were animated, his expression earnest, as if explaining something of great importance. "That's Thomas Kenwood from the New York Tribune," Amber whispered. "He can make or break an exhibition with a single review." My stomach tightened. No wonder Lena had been so desperate to control every aspect of tonight's narrative. A positive review from Kenwood could launch her career to national prominence. I skirted the edge of the room, trying to remain inconspicuous while taking in the artwork. Each piece seemed to explore the theme of false narratives from a different angle. Altered historical photographs, reimagined folklore, fictional diaries attributed to real historical figures. All of it cleverly executed, but with an underlying cynicism that felt calculated to appeal to jaded critics. Then I saw her. Lena stood in the center of a group of admirers, radiant in a sculptural red dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, accentuating her long neck and the designer earrings that caught the light when she laughed. She looked so much like her father in that moment, the same charismatic energy, the same ability to command attention. For a second, I felt a surge of maternal pride. My daughter, commanding this sophisticated room. But then I remembered why I was here, and what she had done. As if sensing my presence, Lena turned. Our eyes met across the crowded gallery, and I watched the color drain from her face. She excused herself from her group and made her way toward me, her expression morphing from shock to anger. "Mom," she hissed when she reached me. gripping my elbow and steering me toward a quiet corner. "What are you doing here? I specifically told you that I wasn't cultured enough." I finished for her. "Yes, I remember." She flinched, but didn't deny it. "This is a professional event. My career is on the line." "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I came. I've heard about your centerpiece, Lena. Providence Whispers, is it? The story of a delusional cleaning woman who thought she influenced street art?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "No, that's not important. What matters is that I know what you've done." I met her gaze steadily. "You stole my letters. You took my private correspondence and twisted it into something false to advance your career." Lena's perfect composure cracked slightly. "They're just old papers, Mom. Urban legends I researched. You can't possibly think that they're real?" I reached into my clutch and pulled out the newspaper clipping with my name circled. "What about this? And the letter that's missing from my tin box? The one about the subway mural that was never photographed? How could you know about that unless you'd read my letters?" Her face hardened. "You need to leave. Now. Before you embarrass yourself. And me." "Ladies and gentlemen," called a voice over the gallery's sound system, "please proceed to the main exhibition room for the unveiling of tonight's featured installation." The crowd began moving toward the back of the gallery. Lena's grip on my arm tightened. "Go home, Mom," she whispered urgently. "Please, we can talk about this tomorrow." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "No, Lena. I think I'll stay for the main event." As we stood locked in silent conflict, I noticed something strange happening on the gallery's far wall. A shadow seemed to move across the pristine white surface, a fleeting silhouette that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Lena hadn't noticed, but I knew that sign all too well. My heart began to race with a different kind of anticipation. Someone else had plans for tonight's unveiling, and whatever was about to happen, I needed to be there to witness it. "After you," I said to my daughter, gesturing toward the main exhibition room. I wouldn't miss this for the world. The main exhibition room had been transformed into a theatrical space. Track lighting created dramatic shadows, and black curtains had been hung to cover one entire wall. In the center stood what appeared to be a partial recreation of the museum where I'd worked, janitorial cart included, surrounded by enlarged photographs of Providence streets where famous murals had appeared. My stomach clenched when I saw the cart. It was nearly identical to the one I'd pushed for 20 years, right down to the frayed strap that held the mop bucket in place. Had Lena gone so far as to visit my old workplace, documenting these details to make her fiction more convincing? The crowd gathered in a semicircle, champagne glasses in hand, buzzing with anticipation. I positioned myself near the back, wanting to observe without being observed. Amber stood nearby, her expression concerned as she glanced between me and Lena. Roger stepped onto a small platform at the front of the room, tapping a microphone to get everyone's attention. "Distinguished guests, critics, friends," he began, his voice smoothly professional. "Welcome to the unveiling of Providence Whispers, the centerpiece of my wife's debut exhibition, Invented Histories." He gestured toward Lena, who ascended to stand beside him, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she scanned the crowd. I could tell the moment she spotted me. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "For years," Roger continued, "Providence has been home to street art that appeared mysteriously, often in locations connected to social injustice. Rumors circulated about the artist or artists responsible, with some speculating that a local guide must have been involved, someone intimately familiar with the city's hidden wounds." The crowd murmured appreciatively. I felt exposed, as if every word was peeling back my carefully constructed anonymity. "Tonight," Roger announced, "my wife presents her artistic interpretation of one such urban legend, the tale of a cleaning woman who invented an elaborate fantasy life as the muse to famous street artists. Through this installation, Lena Wilson explores how the powerless create narratives of influence to compensate for lives of invisibility." Powerless. Invisibility. Each word landed like a slap. Is that how they saw me? Is that how my daughter understood my life? Roger gestured dramatically toward the curtained wall. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Providence Whispers." The curtains parted to reveal a large-scale projection of the recreated subway mural, the one that had been painted over before anyone could photograph it, the one only Banksy and I had seen in its entirety. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even from a distance, I could see it was remarkably accurate. The woman with her back turned, her shadow stretching forward to embrace the running child. But Lena had added elements that were never in the original, thought bubbles above the woman's head showing fantastical scenes of fame and recognition, implying the figure was lost in delusion. Beside the projection stood a glass case containing what appeared to be replicas of my letters, artfully arranged alongside newspaper clippings similar to the one Jack had given me. A small placard identified them as reimagined artifacts, the fantasy correspondence of Eleanor, a composite character. Eleanor. She couldn't even use my real name while stealing my life. Audio began to play through hidden speakers, a woman's voice reading selections from the letters, but with added passages I'd never written, passages that made Eleanor sound desperate and unhinged. "I pretend he values my opinion," the actress read in a quavering voice meant to sound pathetic. I imagine my words guide his hand, that without me his art would have no direction. These fantasies are all I have. Nausea rose in my throat. This wasn't art. It was character assassination. Not just of me, but of the genuine connection that had formed between two unlikely collaborators. A connection that had, in its quiet way, helped bring attention to forgotten corners of Providence. I glanced around at the rapt faces of the audience. They were consuming this narrative without question, nodding at the cleverness of the concept. Even Patricia was smiling smugly, as if Lena's success somehow validated her own suspicions about her sister-in-law's mental stability. Then I noticed something odd. The projection was changing subtly. A slight flicker, a shift in color that most people might attribute to technical issues. But I recognized the signs of digital manipulation. Someone was altering the projection in real time. As I watched, a small symbol appeared in the corner of the mural. A compass rose, its needle pointing north. The exact symbol Banksy had used to sign the letters he sent me. Roger noticed it too. I saw him frown and gesture urgently to a technician standing near the projector. Then, as the audience continued to admire the installation, unaware of the subtle intervention, words began to appear across the bottom of the projection. "The compass always points to truth." Lena's face drained of color. She knew that phrase. It had been in one of the letters she'd stolen from me. Her eyes darted around the room, finally landing on mine with a look of dawning horror. She knew I hadn't done this, which meant she was now facing the possibility that the connection she'd dismissed as fantasy was actually real. The technician was frantically working at his equipment, trying to stop the unauthorized additions, but the projection continued to change. The thought bubbles Lena had added to the woman figure began to dissolve, replaced by speech bubbles containing actual quotes from my letters. The wisdom and insight Roger had mockingly dismissed as the fantasies of the powerless. A murmur spread through the crowd as people began to realize something unplanned was happening. The New York critic Kenwood was furiously taking notes, his expression intrigued rather than dismissive. "What's going on?" I heard someone whisper. "Is this part of the show?" "I don't think so," came the reply. "Look at the curator's face." Indeed, Lena looked stricken, her perfect composure crumbling as her carefully constructed narrative literally transformed before her eyes. Roger had abandoned all pretense of calm and was now shouting at the technical staff. Amidst the growing confusion, I felt a presence beside me. Jack had somehow slipped into the gallery and now stood at my elbow, a slight smile playing on his weathered face. "Quite a show," he murmured. "Did you know this would happen?" I whispered. He shrugged. "Let's just say I delivered a few messages for an old friend. The rest is artistic intervention." As the chaos grew, with guests pointing and whispering and staff rushing about, Lena suddenly locked eyes with me across the room. In that moment, something passed between us, a recognition perhaps, or the first fracture in the wall of lies she'd built. She took a step toward me, her expression unreadable, when suddenly every light in the gallery went out, plunging us into total darkness. Darkness enveloped the gallery, broken only by the glow of cell phones hastily activated. Confused voices rose in volume, some nervous, others irritated. In the strange half-light, I felt Jack's hand on my elbow, guiding me toward a side exit. "This way," he whispered. "You'll want to see what's happening outside." I followed him through the emergency door, which someone had propped open with a small rock. The cool night air rushed over my face as we stepped into the alley beside the gallery. Other guests were beginning to spill out of the main entrance, blinking in confusion at the sudden end to their sophisticated evening. "Look up," Jack said, pointing to the building across from the gallery. I gasped. On the brick wall of the abandoned warehouse opposite Lena's gallery, A powerful projector was casting an image, not the altered version of the subway mural, but an entirely new piece. It showed a woman whose shadow formed the shape of a compass, with ribbons of light extending from it to touch different scenes from Providence, the Veterans Hospital, the community center, the closed textile factory, and other locations where Banksy's art had appeared over the years. Beneath this striking visual was a simple message. The true compass of Providence has guided art from the shadows for decades. Some voices need no spotlight to change the world. People were gathering on the sidewalk now, pointing and taking photos with their phones. I heard exclamations of surprise, speculation about whether this was part of the exhibition after all, a clever meta-commentary extending beyond the gallery walls. Then I saw Lena push through the crowd, her red dress vivid against the night. She stood staring up at the projection, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Roger was behind her, arguing with the building manager about the power outage. Perfect timing, Jack murmured, nodding toward the street. A car was pulling up, sleek and black with tinted windows. The rear door opened, and a manila envelope was extended by a hand I couldn't see. Jack walked over, took the envelope, and returned to my side as the car pulled away. "For you," he said, handing it to me. Final act. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in the familiar scrawl, and a small rectangular card. The letter was brief. "Compass. 20 years of silence was enough. Your voice guided art that changed this city, one truth at a time. The world should know that power often speaks most clearly from the margins. Tonight is yours. Choose your path forward." B. The card was a press credential for the Providence Journal, with the name of a reporter and a phone number scribbled on the back. I looked up at Jack, questions in my eyes. "One call," he said quietly, "and the real story goes public. Not Lena's twisted version, but the truth. That her mother was the unknown compass behind Providence's most meaningful street art. That the urban legend she mocked was reality." I clutched the credential, feeling the weight of the decision. With one phone call, I could reclaim my narrative, expose Lena's deception, and finally step out of the shadows. After decades of being overlooked, I could be seen. But at what cost? Lena's career would be devastated. Our relationship, already fractured, might shatter beyond repair. And I would break the promise of anonymity I'd made all those years ago. Across the street, I could see the exhibition guests still milling about, many now taking photos of the warehouse projection. Thomas Kenwood, the influential critic, was interviewing people about their reaction to what many assumed was a brilliant extension of Lena's show. Patricia had cornered Amber, gesturing animatedly toward the projection and then toward the gallery, clearly demanding explanations. Roger was on his phone, his free hand chopping the air in frustration as he paced. And then there was Lena, standing alone now, staring up at the image of the woman whose shadow formed a compass. Something in her posture had changed, the proud confidence replaced by uncertainty, perhaps even the beginning of understanding. As I watched, she slowly turned and scanned the crowd until her eyes found mine. Even across the distance, I could see the question in them. She took a step in my direction, hesitated, then continued walking toward me. "Mom," she said when she reached me, her voice stripped of its practiced sophistication. "What's happening? Is this because of you?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the expensive dress and the carefully cultivated persona, I could still see traces of the little girl who once squealed with delight when I showed her how to mix watercolors, the teenager who'd wept in my arms when her first serious boyfriend broke her heart, the young woman who'd gradually drifted away, seduced by a world that had always held me at arm's length. "No," I said softly. "I didn't do this, but I know who did." Her eyes widened. "The letters I found in your closet, they were real, weren't they? You actually knew?" "Yes," I interrupted, not wanting the name spoken aloud. "Those stories were mine. Those connections were real." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Would you have believed me?" I asked. "Or would you have dismissed it as the fantasy of a woman you thought had no culture, no significance?" The color drained from her face. "Mom, don't," I said, holding up my hand. "Don't apologize yet. First, you need to understand what you nearly destroyed." I handed her the press credential. "One phone call to this reporter, and everyone will know the truth. Your exhibition will be exposed as a manipulation of a real story, my story. Your professional credibility will be questioned. Everything you've worked for could disappear overnight. She stared at the card, then back at me, fear evident in her eyes. Are you going to make the call? I took a deep breath, looking again at the projection illuminating the night. The visual representation of a hidden truth finally brought to light. Then I looked at the credential in Lena's trembling hand, at Jack's knowing expression, at the crowd still buzzing with excitement over what they thought was revolutionary art. In that moment, standing in the gentle autumn breeze with my secret finally acknowledged by the one person whose recognition I'd always craved, I made my decision. No, I said, taking the card back from her. I'm not going to call. Relief flooded her face, followed quickly by confusion. Why not? I smiled slightly. Because the compass always points to truth, Lena. And the truth is, some voices don't need public recognition to matter. What I did, the stories I shared, the injustices I helped bring to light, those things have value whether my name is attached to them or not. I tucked the credential into my purse. But you and I know the truth now. And that's enough for me. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I agreed. Not yet. But tomorrow we'll start talking. Really talking. About art and truth and the stories that shaped this city. About what it means to be seen and what it costs to remain invisible by choice rather than by circumstance. As we stood there, mother and daughter reconnected by a truth that had nearly divided us forever, the projection across the street began to fade, its message disappearing into the brick like so many street art pieces that come and go with the seasons. But something new had been painted in its place. Something real, not projected. A small perfect compass rose with its needle pointing directly at the gallery where my daughter's exhibition still waited, transformed now into something neither of us had anticipated. The final envelope had been delivered, not just to me but to both of us. And whatever path we chose from here, we would navigate it together, guided by a truth too powerful to remain in shadows. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that speak from the shadows. As Margaret chose forgiveness over vengeance and quiet dignity over public vindication, she reminds us that true influence doesn't always require recognition. Her story forces us to question, what matters more, having the world acknowledge your contribution, or knowing in your heart that you've changed it one whispered truth at a time? What would you have done in Margaret's place? Would you have made that call to the reporter, reclaiming your narrative at the cost of your daughter's career and your own sacred promise? Or would you, like Margaret, find that some connections run deeper than public recognition, that sometimes being seen by the one person who should have seen you all along is enough? If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and follow this channel for more powerful narratives about family, redemption, and the quiet heroes whose influence shapes our world from the margins. Remember that in every family there are untold stories waiting to be heard, and sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones we've never truly seen.